idea where you're headed?
No. People at coach think it's a routine emergency. We've asked for a doctor, but none's on board.
Can you tell us anything more about the hijackers?
Yes. They have knives and mace. They say they have bombs.
How are the people who were stabbed?
One flight attendant's okay. I'm not sure. The other may not make it. Oh my God! Something's wrong here!
What's happening? Amy, are you still there?
We're in rapid descent. All over the place.
Can you look out the window and tell us where you are?
I see colors. Building. We're flying low. We're flying very, very low. We're flying way too low. Oh my God!
Places in the world, in downtown Manhattan. It's a horrific scene here. There's debris flying through the air over the East River here into Brooklyn.
Two airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
boom, 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 boom.
Floor by floor, instead of popping out.
It was like, it was if they had detonated. They were planned to take down a building. Boom, 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 boom.
From the corner, boom, 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 boom. Just like 20 straight hits.
Get down below and you see molten steel. Molten steel running down the channel.
You don't find a telephone, a computer. The biggest piece of a telephone I found was half of the keypad. It was about this big. The building collapsed to dust. That there were 2 airliners, that there were 3 skyscrapers.
I first became suspicious as I watched the towers collapse. I couldn't help but notice that they looked like a controlled demolition because I personally witnessed a controlled demolition in Cincinnati, Ohio, when they tore down a high-rise building on our campus. We were sitting right across the street. The first thing I noticed was that the buildings did not fall the way I would have expected them to fall. From watching the reruns of the planes and how they kind of hit one side or impacted one side more than the other, even if it was in the center, I would not have expected the whole building to just give in at once. And I thought it rather odd that they fell almost perfectly in very similar ways. It seemed odd that lightning would strike twice. And I became highly suspect when Building 7 also collapsed and a plane hadn't even hit it, and that's when I began my researching. Those massive, very thick columns could just snap like that. I would have expected them to, most of them to stay intact with the floors collapsing around them, and what we should have had was a bunch of floors pancaked at the bottom with these spikes sticking out. But the fact that it was all reduced to rubble and powder just did not make sense at all. And the way the beams and the window mullions and things went up.
The symmetry is the smoking gun. Those buildings could not have fallen in perfectly level. It's as if you take a level with a bubble in the center and watch those buildings come down, and that bubble will stay centered the whole way down. And that cannot happen with an airplane hitting one side of the building. It cannot happen that when you have asymmetric damage, you will get a perfectly symmetrical collapse. And all you need to do is look at the videos and see that. These smoking guns. And one of them is the microspheres that were found in 3 different samples from 3 independent researchers. The R.J. Lee Company, the USGS, and Dr. Stephen Jones's work. All 3 separately found these microspheres. They're perfectly round. You cannot get a perfectly round sphere of metal from the building tearing apart. The only way you can get that is by starting with a molten liquid. A liquid will create the perfectly round sphere as it solidifies. There's no other way you could get that. That's one of the smoking guns. The other, I think, is David Chandler's work, which is excellent, the 2 1/4 second of free fall in Building 7. And then the third one is, it is very well explained in the article, The Missing Jolt. And that explains how in the Twin Towers there simply was not evidence of work being done. No work was done to collapse the building. Will always move from the hotter region to the colder region. And what that means is that you cannot get, heat will not migrate towards itself and create a concentration of heat, a concentration of much hotter zones. So therefore, for you to have molten metal in the microspheres, in the rubble pile, in that molten metal pouring out of the side of the tower, for you to have gotten that material, you had to start with a much, much hotter heat source, such as you would get with an incendiary. For you to get 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit in order to melt the steel, melt the iron, to get these spheres, these molten spheres. It's very important to understand that heat cannot move towards itself. Heat will not move towards itself to create hotter pockets. It will only move away from itself. It will only tend towards cooling. So therefore, your heat source must be something like a chemical reaction, an exothermic chemical reaction that reacts, in the case of thermite, reacts at 4,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Then, with that 4,500 degrees, as that heat moves away from itself, there's still enough heat left to do the work of melting the iron.
It's not something that you just get at the local five and dime or you're going to make on your own. It's a very, very difficult to make material. And that's the one thing in there that really tells me specifically that this wasn't some guys working in caves in Afghanistan, or it wasn't somebody in their basement doing this. This was, a massive engineering operation that made these materials.
What we have found is a modern version of thermite, which we call nanothermite, which is produced in a different way. It is not just two powders being mixed. The material is actually built from the atom scale up. We call it the bottom-up procedure, which is what you do in nanotechnology. What we are dealing with, I think, in World Trade Center is modern military material which is unknown to the general public. The findings of the nanothermite in the dust is an unambitious proof that something was going on September 11th, which was unusual. And it is a finding which cannot be accounted for by any other explanation, any other process going on than this was deliberately put in the towers for the purpose of bringing them down.
So the door flew open.